Welcome to this week's episode of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I'm your host, Matt Van Pelt, and with me today is Full Scope IT CTO Dan Wolk. Welcome back, Dan. We missed you last time. Glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
All right. Also with me is Brian Amadeo from Business Development. How are you today, Brian?
I'm doing great, Matt. How you doing?
I'm doing perfect. And Matthew Kelly, a member of the Full Scope IT technical team. How are you today, Matthew?
How's it going?
All right, we'll start this week's episode with breaking down the buzzword.
Breaking down the buzzword.
This week's buzzword is social engineering. Social engineering is a cybercrime that exploits human psychology rather than technological vulnerabilities. It involves using psychological manipulation to trick individuals into divulging sensitive information, performing specific actions, or granting unauthorized access to systems. Psychological manipulation is a key element that sets social engineering apart from other types of cyber attacks. Threat actors are adept at understanding human behavior and leveraging this knowledge to manipulate individuals. So, I guess we'll start breaking this down by asking a question. What are some social engineering techniques?
Well, just for the sake of this podcast, Matt, let me ask you, what's your password?
It's password, Dan.
Yeah, not with a 1, 2, 3. I don't know. I thought it might work. There's a lot of different techniques. We were talking before, and Brian was asking about the difference between phishing and social engineering. And I'd say phishing is really a social engineering technique. Anything that can convince somebody to do something that they shouldn't be doing, by making them believe something that isn't the truth, is really what I would see as social engineering. So phishing falls into that, where you think you're getting an email from somebody asking you to do something or to tell them something, and it's not really them. And there's a lot of different social engineering attacks. It depends what they're attacking, whether they're trying to get information or money, or just simply trying to embarrass a person or an organization. And sometimes it's part of a larger attack where just getting a simple password might get somebody connected to a VPN that then allows them to attack a file server or some sort of database to extract more information.
I think there's a whole nother part of this too. Like, so what Dan was talking about, that's more of the, I would say, computer, internet driven, technology ways to do things. There's social engineering is more like the bigger, broader topic of like, where phishing falls in, where as well as like physical social engineering. Have you ever heard that phrase? Like, if you're carrying a ladder, you can go through any door. Anybody's going to allow you to go through anything.
Or a clipboard. Clipboard work great.
A clipboard. You have a briefcase in one hand and a coffee in the other. So they have those things like specifically like Running Man doors, where you have like a door here and a door here. So this door will open and this one's always closed, and then vice versa. But if you have a coffee, it's like the same thing. Like, oh, I have no hands, so people just let you through. Or if you have you'll have your badge for work, and all my hands are busy, I have a ladder. People are just going to let you in, and you're like, oh, or you show up someplace with a Spectrum shirt or like a whatever internet Comcast shirt on, and be like, hey, I'm here for your internet. 10 times out of 10, or maybe 9 times out of 10, the receptionist at whatever company will be like, oh, here's all our equipment, it's back in this room, and they'll let you in. So that's where social engineering doesn't just stop at I would say cyber crime. A lot of it too is like, it could just be trying to get information from, I don't know, Sirius XM radio or some random stuff, just pretending to be somebody else. So it definitely goes so much further beyond than just cyber.
And the interesting thing is these attacks, like you were saying, they exploit human behavior, and so we've seen attacks using the same human behavior quirks for years now. There were attacks that were done years ago where burglars would set off alarm systems over and over and over again until people watching the offices or the factories or whatever, they would say, "Oh, something's wrong with the alarm," and they would just shut it down because they were tired of hearing the alarm go off. And now we're seeing attacks where people are pushing OTP requests to token apps on cell phones over and over again until people just go, "I'm tired of this," and they just press the "Yes, it's me" button, and let people into MFA authentication. And it uses the same quirk in our desire to not be annoyed by technology to break through the technology.
Humans are simple, aren't we?
Any other examples of social engineering?
There was a school that we may or may not still do IT for. I won't mention the name, right, Dan? So I'm there on a weekend. So we're doing just some kind of server migration. They have an old server. We're putting in a new server. We're moving stuff around, basic, whatever. So we're in there. We're doing everything. Noon comes around. This is like a Saturday. And we're like, hey, we're hungry. We're going to go to lunch. So it's just us and the janitor in the building. So, we tell the janitor, hey, we're going to go to lunch. We'll be back in an hour. He goes, yep, sure, sounds good. So we're gone. We come back. We come in, and the janitor's like, oh yeah, your guys are upstairs. And I'm like, what guy? What are you talking about? It's just me and one other person. I'm like, what guys? He's like, oh, I don't know. Somebody from like, I don't know, some internet something came and said that they need to look in the closet. And I was like, oh, okay. It was a Saturday. I'm like, what the hell? Like, there's no way that anybody works on a Saturday from Spectrum or wherever. So I go upstairs, go in the LAN room or the server room, whatever you want to call it. There's like two guys standing there, and I'm like, hey. I kind of startled them when I walked in. I don't think they were expecting me. I was like, hey, what's going on? Who are you guys? They turn around, they have like the Spectrum uniforms on. They're like, hey, we're from Spectrum. And I go, oh, okay. But like, again, what are you doing here? Because this customer doesn't have Spectrum. So like, who are you? Why are you in this building? And why are you standing in front of all of their sensitive IT equipment? And they're like, wait, what do you mean? Like, of course they have Spectrum. I'm like, nah, no, they don't. I was like, been doing the IT for years, buddy. He's like, oh, isn't this like 123 Main Street? I'm like, no, this is 321 Main Street. He's like, oh, it must be the place right across the street. I was like, yeah, who the hell let you in? He's like, oh, the janitor. Like, we just showed up and said we're Spectrum, and he just like let us in. So so that so they actually were Spectrum. Maybe I just missed their truck or something. That could have turned really bad, but that's how easy it is. You literally just show up. I could get a Spectrum shirt. You go on eBay, buy a Spectrum shirt. I could just show up somewhere with a clipboard and like like a bag on my hip that looks like I have some kind of equipment in it. You can go wherever you want. So that was a big conversation that I had with I didn't get the guy fired. Like, I was very much trying to be as cool as possible with our point of contact there. Be like, he didn't know. But at the same time, there's definitely controls that could be put in place in those kind of situations. But that could have been anybody actually going in there and being like, why am I going to hack your server and go through all this complex stuff when I could literally go in there and just steal your server? Like, they could have taken
throw
that
a USB drive in and
yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry, wrong place. Right.
Yeah, we would have absolutely no idea that happened if that was malicious. So, just something to keep in mind. Like, there's so many different kind of attacks, and when it rains, it pours, I guess.
Yeah, and that would be a combination attack where you're convincing somebody to let you in the door so that you can do something else with the hardware. And some of the attacks are just much more straightforward, where people will forge an email that says it's from a CFO asking for a wire transfer, and people will just put through the wire transfer because it looked legitimate.
Yeah, we go from this like thing where we get annoyed by something, then we start to see the regularity of it, and we're all aware, like even like the auto warranty, right? I'm calling about your auto, like it's a joke at this point. Still get those calls though, like surprised, and then now we're to the point where we're annoyed by it, and we disregard it, despite we know it exists and that it's probably some type of a scam in some way.
To Dan's point too, like I had a medical office client a while ago, and they had multi-factor authentication on. But the owner was one of those guys who he was going to have it his way, or he wasn't going to have us do it any other way. So he's like, MFA, I don't want anybody installing anything on their phones. They're not to get text messages. All MFA requests are going to go to the main line of the company. So what would happen is when somebody, had their phone on them, and it's like, hey, what's your 6-digit MFA code? Microsoft would call the main line of the doctor's office, and the Microsoft voice is like, hey, we just received a MFA request. Press any key to authenticate it. So the office worker had no idea who just authorized or who was requesting it, and they would just blindly hit 0. So I was like, why is MFA even enabled? Why are we doing this? You guys are HIPAA compliant, right? Do you just kind of like not care? And the answer was yes, they did not just care. So
The decision makers really need to understand that this has to come from the top down, and it's really for everybody. If you're not protecting yourself from social engineering attacks from the top down, like in the case of a CFO, if they're telling their staff, when I send in a wire request, you process it as fast as possible, and they're going to send it through email, which is inherently insecure. That's opening the door to these kind of attacks, and the decision makers really need to understand this has to cover everybody from top to bottom.
More than not, we get the, okay, we're going to do this higher level of whatever prevention and security from the executives, but I don't want to. It's too much trouble for the majority of our organization, and then I guess if you have to start somewhere, that's at least a place to start. But we were in a conversation either this week or last week with an organization that everybody but the executives were using MFA or
that's very
increased
common.
security,
Yeah.
which I find odd. What kind of example of culture or just process in general does that
It's ego.
give
It's
the
all
rest of the
ego.
organization?
Yeah.
Right, like they can't be bothered, but yet they're responsible for the well-being and livelihood of all these other people. And it's like, wait a minute. It should be at least I see it. That's why I say if at least executives were doing it and setting that example, and hopefully that's, they're the higher targets too
I
in a
was
lot
gonna
of the
say,
cases.
yeah. I mean, if you have somebody, and again, no offense to anybody in a mailroom, but they don't like do a lot with email. So they're like, they're not the big target. The big target's the CFO. You know what I mean? Like that's the
Now,
target.
that could be where the social engineering comes into play, because as we're saying this out loud, right? And then you go, oh, I'm going to try to emulate or attack that lower level position, because then that's my in to the rest of the organization in another way. So, it's not like it really changes the protection.
Yeah, I had a third party story told to me. I knew the guy who did the IT for the company that this happened to, but they had something like they worked in like really big equipment, and somebody at this company got phished. I think it was somebody in the finance department. So hey, that's a pretty good fish, right? So with these attackers, sometimes like with the phishing, you get higher skill phishing attacks and lower skill. After you get hacked, right? So some people just get in there and all they want to do is spam out more emails to people just to try to trick more people into giving username and passwords. I'd say that's more low skill, like whatever, right? But there's more high skill people. Like what they do is they'll go in and they'll set up email forwarders. So every email, say that is sent to this person in billing, is also being forwarded outside to a Gmail account, or maybe or that attacker just sits in that account and just waits and just reads and just kind of like sees what's going on over time. This happened to a company where they had an invoice for $150,000 piece of equipment, and it was a wire transfer. So when these attackers, they sat there for 6 months and did nothing. The person never had to change their password. MFA wasn't in setup. So it was just 6 months of this attacker just reading email, getting to know the company. So once this request came in, they bought a domain that was very close to, say this equipment was, say like an x-ray machine. I don't know what it was, but they say it was like xraymachines.com. They bought a domain, xraymachine.com, something very, very close to it. And they started sending emails to the company at posing as that because they knew that transaction. So they started using language they set up the same users. So if you're talking to the real Jake Smith, they set up a fake Jake Smith. They never knew the difference, and they ended up requesting a wire for $150,000. And the company was like, "All right, yeah, let's just pay it. They're legit." They paid $150,000, and that money's gone. Last I heard, it was a whole FBI whole deal, but yeah, just gone.
Yeah. So we didn't talk much about how to prevent these attacks.
I'm just here to scare people. I don't care about
Yeah.
prevention. That's boring, dude.
Yeah. And I don't want to shame anybody. Even Microsoft was attacked not that long ago, where it was like a test system that somebody, for some reason, had given the users on the test system cross-tenant access to a production system, and they used social engineering to get into the test system and then jumped into a production system. And this was Microsoft employees who were caught in this. So there's no shame in stopping and saying we need to beef up our security. And the ways to prevent it are both technological and training. We put a lot of really good systems in place that here's like the good AI we finally get to talk about, which will look for phishing email using AI and block them before they even get delivered. And that's extremely powerful. A lot of a huge number of emails get blocked every day that users don't even see when they're protected by this, and they just don't even have to worry about it. And if somebody's sending email out and it's not secured properly from spoofing, um, it's really on the sender to fix their system so that they don't put you in danger by forcing you to read a potentially spoofed email. Um, and the other big thing I would say is really training and proper policies. And anytime you're talking about moving money over a certain threshold, you got to verify that this is a legitimate transaction you're being asked to be a part of.
Yeah, and that's definitely for sure true. And a lot of it, it's like not the employees don't really like that stuff too. I always found that it's like, oh, another training, oh, another policy that we have to like. Why do we have to, if we get a wire request, like why do we have to go to two different people to vet it? And I think a lot of it too is like you actually do have your users in a company like actively working against you because any kind of security, right? There is overhead. It does cause frustration. So a lot of it too is making people like truly, however you do this, if tell me, to truly understand like how much risk there is out there, and like these policies are in place for a reason. Are they obnoxious and annoying? Absolutely. Do they add time on to simple tasks? Absolutely. But will they save you, from that catastrophic event that happens? Absolutely.
You definitely need to talk to your IT provider about what controls are in place on incoming emails and your phone system. Um, Anything that can technologically be taken advantage of for a social engineering attack, there is some way to lock that down with protective technology. Um, and um, boy, I'm not sure what to say about policies. We've worked with many customers to talk to them about how they use email, and to as part of their business process, and that there may be better applications to verify signatures and make sure that people are logged in correctly, and not just trust things like email and SMS, but move things into actual applications that are designed to deal with proper workflows.
Well, if it isn't a tech tip.
Prevent social engineering attacks against your organization with the following best practices: implement security policies, train your employees, protect login credentials and phone numbers, utilize multi factor authentication, secure data transfer and storage, conduct regular security audits, and most importantly, partner with experts like Full Scope IT. If you're interested in learning more about this topic, check out our blog post called What is Social Engineering? There'll be a link in this week's episode description, and we will also have a link posted on our website, fullscopeit.com/resources.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
That brings us to this week's story of the week. It comes from BBC.com. The article is titled New Material Found by AI Could Reduce Lithium Use in Batteries. There's a brand new substance which could reduce lithium use in batteries. Has been discovered using AI and supercomputing. Microsoft researchers used AI and supercomputers to narrow down 32 million potential inorganic materials to 18 promising candidates in less than a week, a screening process that would have taken more than 2 decades to carry out using traditional lab research methods. What do you think about that?
I feel really fortunate to have two opportunities to talk about good AI in one podcast.
Yeah.
I feel like we're always like, evil AI is coming for you.
Yeah, this is pretty interesting, and I mean the global impact, if this turns out to be accurate, is tremendous. I mean, it would really change everything as far as batteries go.
I think it's a lot more complicated than the article makes it sound, and I don't know how to talk about this without sounding really pro EV. But this is one of the reasons why we need to look forward to transitioning to electrifying as much as we can and stop burning fossil fuels, because we're in a transition period now, and the technology is on our side. We're going to find ways to make better batteries. We're going to find ways to recycle things more efficiently. And if we don't start now using the technology that's available, it'll stop the progression in its tracks. So I'm really happy to see that AI is being used this way. The complexity of what they actually did would probably take a much longer article, as well as a lot of knowledge of chemistry and physics that most people would have a hard time following. I get to a certain point, and then I'm not really sure what they're talking about. But it's all good news.
I still think we're lucky that we live now instead of like 100 years from now. I think that the AI thing is, if you do follow it to its logical conclusion, I guess it's basically like something's going to take over or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's only going to get better. Like, like the thing we say, right? Like, right now is the worst it's ever going to be. It's only going to get way better. I think, yeah, we're at a point now where it's gonna society is still kind of like traditional, I would say, right? Traditional in the sense of, AI is not taking over, robots do not do our laundry and think for us yet, or are implanted into our bodies. So I think we're close to like one of the last generations where that's a thing.
I'm cool with the laundry part. I'll wait for Skynet. Like, you could push that off as long as possible. But
any other thoughts on this story?
Inevitable.
Anything?
And I think, just to touch on Dan's point a little bit, I think EVs are like just the thing we relate to the most at this point, regardless of where you stand on any of this. But just like you said, just the fact that if there's an alternative to mining something that we know has negative issues and it's bad for us to do, that's just a win. And I think that's the real takeaway, is that AI is being used to solve some of these. I was joking before we started the podcast that I had asked ChatGPT, just, hey, how do we solve world hunger? Just curious what would it say? But like, this is a real world issue, and it's a global issue, right? It's not just our nation or another nation, or this is something that helps the world. So I think that's the positive.
Yeah, and plus finding having AI help finding new materials. I mean, ethically too, right? So they got to talk about the cobalt mining and how terrible that is. Lithium. It's just there's if it can find actually different sources of power that we could use in batteries that we can ethically use and not have to use slave labor in some other countries,
Yeah.
to get it to us. I'm like it's just a win-win all
Even if
around.
the tech can point scientists in a direction that allows them to do some tests, that allows them to do some research, that's a cool use of AI too. Where might just be that first initial thought that gets the ball rolling.
Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode, so until then, stay behind your firewall.